What is up, Gorilla Nation, and welcome your butts back to another Division 2 build video. And you're probably wondering, another build video? Well, isn't Gear 2.0 coming out soon? Well, yes, but it is still several months away because we are currently getting 3.0 Title Update 7 next month, which is February, in a few weeks. And then we'll be having a PTS, which will approximately take a month. And then by the time they tweak it and fix what bugs they find, then that could be, another few weeks after that. So I'm, anticipating March, April when we get Gear 2.0. Thus, that is why it is still very much viable to put out build videos, because there are still a plethora of new agents coming into the game. And, even though things will be obsolete and irrelevant when it comes to Gear 2.0, depending on what you're using now, but they're still very much viable in order to use in the meantime. And thus all the comments on my last several PvP videos in which I'm utilizing this particular build, and I've been asked, is it the same build as I previously put out the Black Friday? And yes and no, it's just a similar build, not utilizing the Black Friday, but is much more min-maxed, and will actually go over the different values. And what I mean by values is, what do you value more when it goes in correlation to your personal playstyle. So speaking of value, and what value, or I should say, what do you value more? Either extra tankiness, a little extra DPS, the debuff by the 3 pieces of True Patriot by way of the red, white, and blue, which is the red decreases damage dealt by the enemy that you're shooting, white restores armor to friendlies that shoot this enemy, and blue boosts skill haste to friendlies that shoot this enemy. Now this helps out in a squad format. It can help you out on a 1v1 situation. Those cycle, the red, white, and blue, every 2 seconds, so it's just a matter of hitting the right one at the right time, which would be the red, which decreases the damage dealt by the enemy. That would actually affect the player in a 1v1. But the blue and white are most effective in a squad format, or at least 2 to 3 members, if not the whole squad of 4 for the other. According to your playstyle, and whether you're solo or in a squad, will be dependent on whether you run 3 pieces or just go with the average 2 pieces that give you the 10% total armor. Now, you can swap out the gloves, and instead of a blue, go with a utility that'll further increase your skill power, or you can swap out the holster and forego having any skill power whatsoever and just go with the likes of a Heligard holster, which is you won't lose any weapon damage because it also has 2 offensive mod slots just like the True Patriot, but as you can see, you gain that health pool. You go from 103 to 136 with this build in mind, and then 481.9k in armor. So it all depends on your personal preference. So typically, I start out in the Dark Zone with another variation of that, and that would be this build right here. As you can see, you're probably asking 480 to 434k armor. You're losing an offensive mod slot, but you're gaining a offensive attribute on your chest piece. But you are losing almost 50k armor, so you have to have something to more or less fill that gap, and that is by the skill power. As you can see, this one has 1982 on my Pokey heal, which that in turn gives me 20,828 health. Now the other variation that I just had on, which is this one, it has no bearing on any skill power whatsoever, and the base model of that Pokey heal, with not having any mods or any kind of skill power to influence that value whatsoever, your base is going to be 14,212. Now if you have better Hive or Seeker heal mods in this case to get a better value out of it, I know I have one that's kind of low, but I'm getting an average of about 70% more in my healing overall, so that equates to around 6,000 or 7,000 more in my heal. So ask yourself, do you value the likes of that, having a little bit more DPS because the chest piece had 14.5% weapon damage on it, versus this one only has an offensive mod slot, no offensive attribute, so I'm losing 14.5% weapon damage, but it all depends on your personal preference and what do you value most. Now, with that missing armor, I gain value in my heals, so essentially I can get the same amount of survivability. I don't lose too much DPS, The MK46 is 34.6 on that other build, and it's 33.3 on this one, so you're still hitting pretty hard. And of course, this needs no introduction. It is the Pestilence, 30.3k. After you hit an enemy, it also applies the Plague of the Outcast on them, which is if you kill them or down them, they don't go into a down state, they just turn into that mist of piss, because that cloud hits for 1000% of your weapon damage. And that debuff that is applied reduces their healing by 50%. So if you're running the 3-piece True Patriot, you're applying the debuff by the red, white, and blue, and also you're putting the Pestilence debuff on them that decreases their healing by 50%. You can see this multi-layered onion. We're peeling it back, and it has different layers in which it affects the enemy, and they synergize well together in case of the 3-piece True Patriot along with the Pestilence. But this particular build, I typically start out with the other. And the reason why I do that, because I'm a DPS guy. Now, I typically play in a squad, and my heals actually come in handy more, but it all depends on what I run into. If the agents I run into, let's say they do not have 100% hazard protection, then that amount of skill power on the other build increases the damage of my hive, so the damage is higher on my hive, and plus that also, by using the hive, procs my spark. But let's say they're using 100% hazard protection. So it's not going to matter more or less how my bleed affects them, how much damage my bleed gives them, because they have 100% hazard protection. But you can still use that hive to proc spark. So if I run into that, then I switch this particular build, because I don't need extra damage on the hive. I'm just utilizing it to proc spark. And I'm still getting 14,000 heal from my pokey heal. Now this mask, you can switch it out. This is a very versatile build. If I want to go straight up PvE, I just simply switch out the mask to this one, which has a total of 78% damage to elites on it, plus the 12% that's on weapon attachments on my MK46, so I can still achieve 90% damage to elites. So still very effective on all things PvE, even heroics, even the raid that I've used this and utilized this build on. But for PvP, this particular mask has the 50% hazard protection, 173 skill power. Of course, I wish that skill power was a lot higher of a value, but since the current RNG and the way the attributes are, the pie system, I should say, when it comes to the attributes, since it has 3 on it, then it's very hard to actually find one with super high skill power, at least around 250 to 300, unless you find that golden goose or that unicorn that's hiding out there. But let's face it, the RNG really sucks. So, at least 11% damage to elites helps me out in the dark zone against those gold NPCs. I can dispatch them faster. 173 is not necessarily null and void, because I can still utilize it on the other variation of this build when I just switch on Empowered and put skill power on my gloves in place of the health. So, you know, it's still versatile in that way. This mask still works for multiple facets of very different builds. And then of course insulated, so I'm getting 80% hazard protection from this one particular mask. Using 2-piece Healer Guard, the 2 pieces gives me that 5% total armor, and then 20% hazard protection. That puts me at 100% hazard protection. The attribute rolls on this backpack are 5% total armor, 5% weapon damage, 30,476 armor with hardened, and of course spark, damaging enemies with skills or explosive, grant 15% weapon damage for 15 seconds. It has an offensive and a defensive mod slot. In the offense, I'm getting 6% weapon damage. In the defensive, I'm getting 4869 armor, 3.5% total armor, and then 3% explosive resistance. Now, the second piece has 14% total armor, 41,411 armor, and then 34,108 health, and we're utilizing Bloodsucker. In my opinion, when it comes to PvP, Bloodsucker completely obliterates and blows Unbreakable out of the water. Unbreakable becomes on a cooldown, can only proc every so often, I think once every 60 seconds or something like that, and you can die multiple times in a matter of 60 seconds. And then when it comes to Bloodsucker, it feeds off Clutch builds, because Clutch heals 1% of their armor and then 15 to 20% of their health, but even that 1% of armor that you take off will still proc your Bloodsucker. So once you strip their armor off the first time, you get a proc, And then after they, hit you a few times, they get just a smidgen of their armor back, and you completely rip it right back off. Then you're getting that second proc. So you can effectively get 30% bonus armor in just a matter of seconds. So that is why it's very crucial and very OP. Well, I wouldn't say OP, but it combats those clutch builds very, very effectively. It is the most effective talent when it comes to clutch builds. It has 2 defensive and an offensive mod slots. And the first one, 5128 armor, 3% total armor, and then 4% explosive resistance. Another 5.5% going to my LMG by way of damage. And the second defensive mod slot, 4869 armor, 3.5% total armor, and then 3% explosive resistance. And you can kind of catch a theme going here as far as all the defensive slots that I have. I'm putting explosive resistance on it. Now let's go to that 3-piece True Patriot. And the gloves, we're getting 11% damage by LMG, 15,219 health, and another 6% LMG damage, and a total of 17% LMG damage just on my gloves. On to the knee pads, 12% total armor, and then it has an offensive and defensive mod slot, 5.5% weapon damage on the offensive mod, and then 3911 armor, 3.5% total armor, and 4% explosive resistance in the defensive mod slot. Now the third and final piece of True Patriot. Now since I'm not going with any skill power, I have been unable to come across a better True Patriot holster in which that I can have a good health numerical value and then put on a percentage of health value just as my Gila holster has. But, if I don't want the 3-piece, let's say I'm solo for instance. If I go into the Dark Zone solo, then I'll switch out this particular True Patriot holster for the likes of this Healy Guard. I get the same amount of damage because it also has those 2 offensive mod slots, but as you can see, it does further my health pool and works out really well. But in a group, the 3-piece is, in my opinion, is actually better. But it has those 2 offensive mod slots in both, getting 6% LMG damage, and the second one 6.5% for a total of 12.5% LMG damage. So it is very, very effective when it comes to those likes. Damage with plus survivability, plus the proc of Bloodsucker, and of course accompanying that with the Pestilence. It is very, very nasty. And don't take my word for it. The last 4 or 5 PvP videos that I've actually put up, which those links are in the description below. That'll be the full extensive gameplay. They're very hilarious in my opinion, so definitely go check them out. But you'll see the hazard protection that it has. You'll see the explosive resistance and how Seekers or even the grenade launcher from the Demolitionist affects it. And it works out really, really well. So let's go over that character sheet here. Starting out first, we'll go with the MK46, 33,331. Minus 25% weapon handling, getting 30.5% all weapon damage bonus, and then 66% LMG damage bonus for a total of 96.5% weapon damage. Moving on, 24% damage to elites. Like I said, it does help out with and dispatching those NPCs in the Dark Zone, so it's not null and void. There's are the talents as followed: max health pool 103, 110. 51 555 health regen, 15% protection from elites, 15.47% explosive resistance, and 100% hazard protection. Now in those defensive mod slots that I have, if you have better values that have explosive resistance on them, then this value of explosive resistance will actually go up. There are some lurking out there that have upwards to 8 to 10% explosive resistance. So essentially and effectively, I can have over 40% explosive resistance if I so choose, and if the RNG gods will actually bless me by dropping me those mods. But the ones that I have are kind of on the average side, but at least they have a good armor value on them, numerical and percentage wise, and then the third slot, explosive resistance. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you fudging later.